Here. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Christina Hill. I'm a senior associate here at Morae, and I'm very excited for everyone to be joining us today. Today's webinar is going to be a case study that follows the Trinity River Authority of Texas. On the call presenting, we've got Kurt Thies, the Senior Director here at Morae, and Kelly Murphy, a Records Administrator at TRA. So if you hear TRA, you know what that means. Quick little housekeeping notes here. If you do have any questions, if you didn't get the chance to pre-submit them in your registration, no big deal. If you look at the bottom of the screen, you should have a toolbar here and potentially up here, depending what you're using. Use that Q&A functionality to submit those questions. You're welcome to drop it in the chat, but sometimes they can get lost in the shuffle. We will have a Q&A segment at the very, very end. So just to help prioritize our presenters, we'll tackle those then. Yes, the deck and recording will be shared to all of you that are here today. So again, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Without further ado, let's jump in. And Kurt, I'm going to pass this over to you to kick us off.
Fantastic. Thanks, Christina. Welcome, Kelly. So a few things as we get started. I'm still showing slide one. So is that me or we flipping yet? There we go. All right. So here's me. The big excitement here is that I've got a new picture. So finally, the person who probably is from 20 years ago that I see in my head, this is me today. The other fun fact is I had a beard. So any of you who saw Kelly and I present at the eRecords conference, and I said, I need to use this app that we have. They're like, no problem. So suddenly my beard disappeared. Thanks to AI. So we're here to focus on the use case with Kelly Murphy at Trinity River Authority. I'll say one word. So you're seeing Morae. A lot of you know us as Gimmal for the information governance software. So as part of our acquisition and joining Morae Global, we're rebranding everything with Morae. So you'll see all our products with that look and feel. So just so you know that when we talk about Morae, that is part of Gimmal and the software solutions. So Morae is focused on the business process and how information flows through organizations, the use of technology, applying AI, and doing that at scale as a trusted advisor. So that's what we're here to talk with Kelly about. So Kelly, I want to talk a little bit about your background. In particular, we all have a journey in how we come to our jobs. So how did you end up at Trinity River Authority? What was your journey to this position?
Sure, thank you. So I went to grad school starting in 2020 at UNT for a master's degree in library science. Um, I, I had been a stay-at-home mom and had done some freelance website work before that, and I was ready to pick a direction and go with it. So I entered that program not really knowing which direction I wanted to go, but that I wanted to go into this field. I love learning. I love information. I love getting information from point A to point B. I loved everything about that. So I took a couple of introductory classes, and then I took an archives class. And from the very first day of the archives class, that was it. That sold it for me. I love the way that we tell stories. I love that how we give voices to the stories that are not always told. So archive was it for me from that very first time. So as I went through that program, I took more classes on archive management, disposition of things. It's not called that in archives, but learning what needs to be in your collection, what needs to be removed from your collection, how to preserve items, those kind of things. And I did my internship with the city of Dallas, and that was a great experience. My undergrad was in environmental studies. So when I was looking for an internship, I just thought, it'd be really cool if I could find something sort of environmental. So when I put that word out, I did get a response from the city of Dallas who said, hey, Hey, you want to look at the water records? We have a bunch of those. Those are not my favorite thing to look at. John was more interested in the arts and the cultural districts. So they had a great collection of water records, and so I started digging through those and started trying to give some order to that collection. So when I was looking for a job, when I saw this one pop up, it really was that experience and that interest in water and the water environment that really led me right into this role. So
Yeah,
that's how I ended up here.
that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. And I think with our audience, we're all kind of bound with this sort of passion for information. As you said, how we tell stories. So the information is not just data, but it's really how we preserve, how we focus on uh, being the custodians of information in our organizations. And more that involves technology. I've already mentioned AI. So it's the business process of how that data flows. And one thing that I think we'll see as a theme is data quality. So we're talking about rot, redundant, obsolete, trivial information, and why that is important to address. Before we dive into Trinity River and the use case, um, a lot of people in the audience are involved in the industry. Tell me a little bit about how you participate in the larger information governance records management industry as a whole.
I have been involved, as soon as I started this role, of course, I was brand new to this role, and this position in my organization was also a fairly new position. It was only created a year before I started. So we were starting from scratch, basically. So when I started, I'm in the risk management department. That's where they put my role here. My manager was very encouraging to get out and get involved. That's how we're going to learn, is to be involved in things like this, the webinars, the professional organizations, Nagara, ARMA. For in Texas, we have a river authority admin forum. So just
Mm,
other groups of river and water districts. So I could find people like me that are dealing with the same things that I am. And then getting involved as well in, again, being in risk management. So I go to risk management conferences as well to learn more about that side of my department.
okay, that's fantastic, and maybe we can get some stuff going in the chat. So others who are involved either in Nagara, which is for government agencies, um, ARMA chapters, and so forth. So I know we have a lot of people from our community. As we go to the next slide, um, we'll lay out kind of our agenda here. So we want to talk about this particular use case with Trinity River Authority. So it is an actual river, and you're in Arlington, Texas. So in
Yes.
between, like anyone who's flown into DFW, you kind of have Dallas on one side, Fort Worth on the other, Arlington in the middle. Um, and we're going to look at the challenge. So, what does rot remediation, data cleanup mean for an organization? We're going to talk about the solution. So, how Kelly has started addressing that within her organization, what the results, what the impact of that is, and kind of the way forward. So that's our outline, but we're really here to learn the specifics of her story. So on the next slide, and I love the fact this is Kelly provided some actual pictures. So this is pretty great. Tell us a little bit about Trinity River Authority and the information you're managing there.
Sure. So the river authority, there are several in Texas. Each river basin has its own river authority or water district. So we are responsible in our organization, we're responsible for water and wastewater treatment, water supply, and then we operate a dam down at Lake Livingston. So we don't own the lake, but we own the dam that goes with it. Um, TRA was established in 1955. That is an act of legislative
Hmm.
to create these authorities, and each river authority has a slightly different set of governing principles. So different authorities do different things. So we're primarily water and wastewater treatment. We have a little bit over 500 employees right now, and we are in 13 different facilities. So you mentioned my office is up here in North Texas. We have like 5 wastewater plants up here in the DFW area and 1 water plant. And then, but we're also responsible for the entire river basin. So that goes down to um, Lake Livingston, which is the primary water source for the city of Houston. So we have water plants down in Huntsville and Livingston and in that area as well. So we're spread out over 17, I think 17 counties. 17 counties, that is thousands and thousands of square miles there, spread out. It takes me about 4 hours to drive down to the most southern location. So we're spread out. We are not, our records are not centralized. And that is because each water plant operates individually and they need their records on site to provide to our governing agencies. So we have large volumes of records, both physical and digital, kind of all over the place. When I came into this organization, we did not, like I said, we did not have a records administrator prior to a year before I started.
So you were
So
the
this
first
was,
person in this role?
well, I was the second person in this role. The first person was here for a year and found a different job. So second person in this role, it looked like throughout the history of TRA, we had tried several times through committees to do records management, but without one person overseeing that,
Yeah.
and a committee, you're just gonna, this is nobody's priority. So totally understandable that that kind of goes by the wayside. So the other thing is with each one of our plants being self-sustaining, they've always been kind of responsible for their own records, which means everybody holds things in their own way of organizing or not organizing. And they may have an idea of what the laws are regarding records retention, but other than the ones that report directly to an agency like TCEQ or EPA, those kind of regulatory agencies, everything outside of that, there's been a big question on how long do we keep this? How do we, what do we do with it? And what do we do with it when we're done with it?
So you're setting standards and creating consistency through the organization.
Yes, trying to.
Trying to. Yeah.
We're getting started. So it is a long process, and I've been here 3 years. So we're still very much in the beginning of this process.
But and that's, I think, important to note because we think of this as a journey. This isn't a project. It's not sort of a singular one and done effort. And so that's something I think is important about your story, that this is a journey. It's a continual process. And the way that you create the structure within the organization, because as you said, it's been very decentralized. It's a highly regulated industry. We always, talk about that internally. Who are we servicing? And I think, anyone participating is likely in a highly regulated industry, meaning the places that really care about data, and more than care about data, data is central to the operation of the business. Data matters, the records matter. At Morae, we work with a lot of law firms. And I say, well, what's the relationship between corporate and legal? Well, legal is it's sort of an extreme example of an organization that everything that they're doing is about creating an official record and doing it largely on behalf of their the companies and organizations. So in an organization, your most challenging records are usually going to be in tax, legal, HR, risk and obligation. So the challenge here to frame this, so as you mentioned, you're the second person in this role. It's really recent compared to the lives of the organization and how many records have been compiling over time. And I think this notion of modernizing records management, which kind of brings in the fact that we're all working with technology. Technology is a part of our jobs, it's part of the tool set. And it's also part of the problem because it proliferates this information. So when we talk about cleaning information up, we're really talking about the unstructured data, all kind of the nooks and crannies. You have structured systems, and by definition, it's usually going to have better controls. It's the file shares, it's SharePoint, it's the email, it's all these other places where data piles up. And then how do you go back sort of after the fact and now clean that up? And again, we need to use technology. There's a methodology to doing that. So I would suspect that it's a common challenge with everyone participating in this. And so with that, let's dig a little deeper into how you actually went about identifying the problem and addressing it.
Yeah. So I want to go ahead and start by saying that I know we're talking about digital and file shares here, but I do not want to skip over the fact that the people part of this had to
Yeah.
be first. I feel like I spent the first year of my job just going from site to site and getting to know people, making sure they understood who I was, what my role was, that I was not going to come in and throw away their things.
Hmm.
Again, I've got an archivist heart. I'm going to keep what I think has historical and archival value. I'm not just here to be the compliance police. I wanted them to feel comfortable asking me questions. I wanted us to feel comfortable together saying, I don't understand the Texas, TSLAX codes. So we know who to reach out to and we can ask questions and we can get clarification. So much of my first year was in person. Very, as many visits as I could. We handled paper first. I was help people clean out their closets, clean out the attics, clean out the basements, clean out the maintenance buildings where we didn't think there would be anything out there. So again, just getting them comfortable
Yeah.
in the physical world with going through things made it easier to go to this next step, which was, okay, now I want you to get comfortable digging through the digital things.
Yeah.
Even our most minimalist people are digital hoarders. So we don't know what we have. And that was a big question that I kept getting asked as I'm looking forward to modernizing my records management software and trying to plan what the future is going to look like. I didn't know what we had in our shared drives. I still don't know what we have all the time in physical. I didn't know what I didn't know. So permission to dig in and just start looking was the key factor in starting this project.
And tell us a little bit about that, because that's something that comes up a lot. How you get buy-in from the organization, how you develop the business case to bring in tools to start chipping away at this issue. So, how did you go about doing that, getting the sort of the authority and um, the backing for this project?
Sure. Our buy-in came in a little backwards, I think, than how it normally works. We knew that we wanted to replace our records management software. The system that I have right now is 20 years old. It is not being updated. It's not keeping up with technology. So as I brought forward the idea of let's look at replacing that, that's when the questions started popping up with, are we ready to start a project that big? That's going to touch every single individual, every project that we have. Um, and when I was in a place of, I don't know what we have, I don't know what needs to go into a new system,
Yeah.
that's where we were able to bring in Gimmal and say, okay, I have a solution for at least one piece of that.
Yeah.
Um, you know, uh, I'm working with other departments to help update their systems, but a good chunk of what we have are in these shared drives. We'll start here and then we'll tackle, email and SharePoint later. But that was a way to get in and start getting more access, start seeing what we have, start answering those questions for myself so that I know when those next steps come, we'll be able to build something more functional and more accessible.
Yeah, and I think that's a key point because even though with Gimmal and Morae, we're a software provider, we wrap that around this collaboration with customers like yourself. That you first have to understand what you have, where it lives, how to apply policy, and then you have to address this, especially on the electronic, the cleanup. So just moving it to a new platform, a new technology, moving it to SharePoint, whatever it may be, until you clean it up, and uh, like thinking of curating the data. So more data just creates it kind of clogs up the system, and this concept of data quality. Um, it's not about better data so much as less data. You need the right information.
Right.
And rot, when we talk about cleanup, that's one thing. But when we look at it at the lens of improving the quality of the information, like, okay, that sounds like housekeeping, good idea, but why? And then thinking about where we're headed with AI, looking at all this data, too much information, you're now creating redundancy in the system. So what is the true information? You have obsolete content, which means that you have information that's misleading. It shouldn't be in there. It's obsolete. It's no longer relevant. It's not the true fact. And then you have the trivial information that sort of overwhelms the system with the signal to noise ratio. Like it's not relevant. So let's strip it out. So data, addressing the rot, getting to the information that matters, and as you said, identifying what that is, and then getting rid of everything that doesn't belong. So as we move forward in the slide, talking about the challenge, let's get into a little bit about the overview. So let's talk about the program, what you were dealing with, and how you started going about addressing it.
Sure. So when we started this project, I'll go ahead and say that we started it a very minimal compared to what I know the Gimmal Discover tool can do. I started with the obsolete. I picked, I asked it to run a scan on items that were more than 7 years since they had last been modified. Now, of course, some retentions are longer than that. Some retentions are much shorter than that. But that was a good starting point just to get an idea, to start showing people what we had and where it was.
Yeah.
So we ran scans. I didn't scan everything all at once. We have 2,700 different targets that the product is pointing to. But I started very small. I started in our department. Let's scan it and see what we can find. And then when we look through that, then we went out broader. Let's look at our admin services department. And then we'll start looking at individual plans. So that I was running these scans and getting chunks of information that I could use. And then I took that and, I mean, this has been very manual, very in person. So much of this, like I said earlier, is making people comfortable. I don't know if you start digging through your network drives, you may find a folder that was from the person that was before you, and in their folder was all of the information from the person that was before them, and so on. So, and you've never touched it because you didn't know what it was. You're new to the job. We see that a lot with our executive assistants. You know, you'll get a whole collection of information, and you're sitting on it because you're still learning your job. Well, then it's 3, 4, 5 years in, and you realize you've never opened the folder. But because you've never opened the folder, you don't want to delete it because you don't know if there might be something in there that you might need. So
Yeah.
much of this, again, meeting with people one on one and saying, okay, here's what the results are. Let's break this into chunks and just start digging in there and seeing what might be in there. You have permission to open this and look at it. And if we identify that it is, past its retention, or that this was never a record to start with, then I gave you permission to delete it, and if you end up deleting something that you weren't supposed to, you can blame me. It's okay.
Mhm.
Like I'm okay with saying let's start letting some of this go. So it's been interesting to see as we've dug into this just what we're finding.
What are some of the examples? What are some of the sort of strange things that lurk out there?
So if you think about like right now, most of us are on a system that has cloud backups, right? So
Yeah.
if I, do something personal on my computer, well, it's going to go into my own personal OneDrive. But prior to just a few years ago, if you had something on your computer that you wanted backed up, you would just throw it in the share drive and just, you're going to get a new computer. What do you do with all your stuff? You're going to throw it in the share drive.
Yeah.
You get back from vacation and you're uploading your photos. Where are you going to put them? Well, you're going to put them on your computer. So a lot of what I found on this initial scan were not records at all. They were vacation photos. They were recipes that HR used for our wellness challenges. They were, Christmas parties and mission trips. I saw one, I shared this at T-Slack as well. Like there was a folder where somebody had a tamale rolling contest. So it was just photos of tamales with rulers on, how big and small the tamales were. These were not records at all. Um, Going back 20, 25 years, remember when we got new programs and they were on CDs and you had to,
Oh
install the
yeah.
CD? All of these program files, all of these install files from software that nobody's touched in 20 years, it's just junk. It's just junk sitting there taking up space. So there was a lot of non-records to start with, and then other things that had very, very clear retentions that were past that. A lot of our lab data we know for sure is 10 years. So if it's been sitting there 15, 20 years, it's safe. Again, I sat down and talked to everybody. I wanted them to feel comfortable. I am not going to delete anything that you think might be important. I'm not going to delete anything that we have questions about right now. Let's hit those big chunks of data and get rid of the things that we know for sure are no good.
So to go about this, and I usually frame it as inventory, policy, and process. So the inventory is the stuff. What do you actually have? Do you know what records you have, where they're at? The policy then being the retention, the holds, the disposition, and then the process. How is the information actually used and flowing through the organization in its life cycle? So talk about the policy side of stuff. You mentioned giving people permission, being the authority. It's okay to delete things that aren't a record, and because we have a process and we have a policy for that. Talk about how you establish the policy. You mentioned it came from TSLAC. So for people not in Texas or in government, that's a Texas State Library and Archive. So they publish the schedule that you use for the state.
Right. So they're giving us general guidelines. We are considered local government, so our guidelines are not as strict as a state agency would be. So there is some room in there for flexibility. Um, a lot of places have developed their own internal policies that are more specific for their agency. We're not quite there yet. So we're still looking at this huge document that TSLAC provides and using that as guidelines. And I'm starting to make notes of, well, this particular type of document is not in TSLAC specifically. So let's figure out what we will call it and what kind of retention. Are there any other laws? Are there any federal laws that would
Yeah.
supersede that? And just start looking at those things. So we do have a records management policy. By law, we have to have that. We do have a records management officer that would be the head of the admin services department. She's not a records person, but she's got that role with the state. So when we do begin the disposition process, it is four levels are checking through it. Whether this is paper, digital, whatever, when we realize something is past disposition or, that retention period, the employee or the records custodian will fill out what they're ready to fill out a log on what they're ready to dispose of. That'll go to their manager, who will sign off of it on it. That will come over to me, where I'll verify that these records are eligible for disposition, and then that eventually gets signed off by what's my boss's boss, for that final check. So she's the legal authority there. So that does take a lot of pressure off the individual employee, because they know when they fill out that, they're going to have 3 other people look at it and verify that it's okay.
So there's a defined process and how it goes
Yes.
through the life cycle
Yeah.
that applies the policy. I love this photo that Christina just, as we look at sort of the results of this program that you've started. Um, so this is really Trinity River that we're looking at,
This
the
is
part of the
our
plant.
this is yes, one of our wastewater plants. Our central one in Dallas is the second biggest wastewater plant in the state. And so, yeah, they're processing almost 200 million gallons of water a
Mm,
day.
wow.
A lot goes through there, and of course, all of that is regulated.
It's all regular. Yeah. So it all translates into there's a lot of
There's a
records
lot
being
of data,
generated.
yeah.
So talk about the impact that this program has had. You talked about the change management. Are you starting to see results? Are people noticing what you're doing? What are sort of the wins that you're experiencing?
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, the connection and the networking collaboration between departments has been such a crucial part of this, to be able to get out and talk to people and have them understand what we're doing, and help them through some of these problems. It's also helped me to look at other departments that have systems of record and see where there are missing pieces in their systems of record, so that we can make sure all of that data goes where it needs to. We don't need things in a shared drive like that. It's living in this kind of third space that it doesn't need to be in. We want those things in a different system. And if it doesn't have a home, then obviously it'll go into a records management system later. But to the best of our ability, we want like data to go together so that we can have that for future analysis. So yeah, it's beginning to make a difference. Like I said, people are much more willing to dig in and start looking at it. They see, in some cases, how hard it is to find what they're looking for, the
Yeah.
amount of time that can be saved if things were more organized, and just again the amount of extra that's bogging them down when they're trying to go through their folders.
So would you say that I focus a lot on the quality of the data. Is the confidence, the trust in the information, is that one of the measures in something that you're seeing through this program?
I think it can be, in certain places. Not so much. I don't think so much the trust in the data, because I think we rely a lot on our legal department to kind of handle the really important stuff. But
Sure.
uh, as far as it's almost the other side, we're finding, we've done PII scans as well to look for things that shouldn't be in there. So we know what we have in there is real, and if it's a record, it's real, it's good, it's authentic. But again, when you're concerned about not being able to find what you're looking for, when you're concerned about people dropping things in there that should have never been in there to start
Yeah.
with, what is the safety, the privacy, and the security look like? That's been more of our point that we wanted to drive home in this process.
So you mentioned the PII. So were you expecting PII to be in there, or were you said you were surprised to find it? So PII is out there. It shouldn't be, but you need to identify and then deal with it, take action on it.
Right. So I actually was surprised that there wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
I was really pleased with that result. I had a couple of departments come to me a few months ago and ask to do a scan for social security numbers. There have been some issues with every company out there, And we had a few employees that had been hit with some fraudulent stuff. So we wanted to see if we thought it was coming, if it was any way it was coming from us,
Mm.
or if odds are it wasn't. It was probably coming from the phone company that had been hacked. But what I was able to do in that process was, look at those employees, and I realized, well, they were all different ages. They were all at different locations. They were all here for, some of them were new employees, some of them were older employees. Um, so when I started the scan, I was like, I really don't think that there's enough in common with this group to even think that this breach was coming from us, but we'll run the scan anyway.
Yeah.
So we did, and for the most part, what I found was exactly what I expected to find. There was Social Security numbers, but they were in the finance department, associated with payroll. Well, we took that information and double checked that server to make sure it was locked down the way it should be. Only people in finance had
Mm-hmm.
access to it. Nobody else had access to it. There were some things in HR. Again, check the privacy settings in those folders and make sure those were locked down and everything looked really good. I did find a few other random things. Again, just as an example of you don't know what you have that's out there. I
Yeah.
did find one file. It was a personal file. We don't have printers at home. We come to work and we print our things off at work. I do
Yeah.
that too.
Happens.
So it was a letter to the IRS, just from an employee. This is not a current employee. This is somebody that has been gone for 10 years. But dear IRS, I don't think I owe this many taxes. Can you look into this for me? Right? Here's my name, address, social security number, all
Mm.
of my information, my entire,
Yeah.
identity right here on this paper that you would then print off and mail. But they had saved a copy of it.
Sure.
So just, I didn't find too many things like that, but that was an example of that was nested several levels deep into the folder structure that nobody would have come across it. They wouldn't have known to look for it, but that kind of stuff's just out there.
Yeah.
And I don't know who has access to it and what the permissions are on those higher level folders. So that's what we found from that scan.
So it kind of comes back to where you started, know what you have, know where it is. And even in this example, knowing if you have a problem with it or not, so that you have confidence in the data. So I know we have some questions. Christina sent out information, and we have a few from the audience. So I love these pictures. So let's first talk about looking forward. Now that you've built this foundation, where you're looking to go with your program, and then we're going to open it up and take a look at some of the questions that people have. So starting off with Rebecca. So have you been successful at purging from local drives? And if so, what was your approach? What method and or programs were used to assist with tackling rot?
So I think I covered most of this already, but just to say what our success is right now, we have scanned about a third of the targets that we originally identified. And just straight numbers from those original scans, I identified about 400,000 items
Hmm.
that were over 7 years old since their last modification. From that 400,000, 300,000 of them were either obviously over retained or they weren't records to start with.
Yeah.
So we're making a huge dent in the amount of rot that we're addressing just in that initial scan. So the plan going forward is continue the scan. Like I said, I've only done a third so far. We're still at the beginning, and
Yep.
we're only looking at obsolete. We chose obsolete first because generally when you get rid of the obsolete, you also get rid of the redundant. When people make copies, they just make newer copies and newer copies. So that was why we started with the obsolete scans first.
And I think that's an important point. That's something that we emphasize, that there's technology, but you need a methodology along with it. And in records management, for consistency, you need to sort of document, how am I going about this? and have a process. You're not just randomly deleting things. And so Phil has a question. I like that we're getting some live ones. To that point, what were your steps to help departments clean out their shared drives to help organize only the official records?
We're still at the beginning of that, but I'll say that if you email or call somebody to ask them to do something, they'll put it on their list and they won't get to you. I have, again, the privilege, so thankful for it, that I'm allowed to travel. I know other people are dealing with hundreds of sites and may not have that opportunity. I have the opportunity to travel and say, hey, you want to book a whole day? Let's go through this. Or do you want to book a couple hours? I will sit here with you. Again,
So,
that's
so
that
it's very
permission.
hands-on. This is
It has
not
been
just,
very hands-on to start with.
yeah,
I know there are a lot of features that we can automate later, but very hands-on to start with, and just say, hey, let's start looking at this together. And when they do start looking at it, that's when they realize what they have. I haven't gotten pushback. I've
yeah,
gotten, oh, I had no idea this was here. And occasionally I've gotten, oh, we've been looking for something like this. This was great documentation we could have used to write our procedure. Well, it was already written 20 years ago. We just
yeah.
didn't know where it was.
Perfect. So I think we have a couple of these. So we'll flip through on the next slide. So Phil, thank you for that question. So Marshana has a question. What software and or tools are used to help prevent bit rot, as well as salvage data after bit rot has occurred? So bit rot, we're getting the long-term digital preservation and the actual bits and bytes getting corrupted. In other words, what is the process of preventative measures to take versus aftercare for bit rot?
I was going to let you answer this one more because it
Yeah.
is a little bit more
So,
technical.
so this is technical. So this is an interesting question, Marshana. So as I mentioned, bit rot, you get into long-term preservation of information, especially when you're archiving. And when I say long-term, like not 5 or 10 years, but like 100 years. So what happens when electronic information starts to degrade and then it's no longer retrievable? You also get into like you mentioned, some of the systems that we used to install with, I would go back to floppy disks and CDs. What if you don't have WordPerfect 5.1 and you have a document? You need that to access it. So this gets into accessibility over time. This isn't something that you're really touching upon. There are software tools that do that, usually archiving systems that focus more on that. So not something necessarily in the rot cleanup, but we appreciate the question. Let's see what else we
I
have.
think for
Yeah,
preventative too, this is where I have focused on make sure your systems are up to date. Make sure you have what you need. When we do upgrade technology, upgrade with it. Yes, I have a stack of floppy disk in my office. And I have people that refuse to get rid of it. But so if I can't open it, that means you can't open it and it hasn't been opened in 20 years. I'm getting rid of it.
yeah. So in that case, because it is a good question, you wouldn't want highly regulated information that you may be audited or you have to produce on those floppy disks. So you are migrating everything forward,
Right.
so it's in a current environment. Okay, Christine, do we have any other questions there? We have Rebecca. Okay, is there a way to identify records with event-driven retention in unstructured data?
In the share drive specifically, it's really going to be about how you title your documents. I think that, you're lacking the metadata that you have in a more structured records management system. So I'm going with titles. So there are ways to automate some of that retention that is event driven if the user has titled their document in a way that makes sense. So if it is something, in our case, it is chemical analysis, July of 2011. Well, I know for sure if everything else in that folder is also a chemical analysis, I know for sure that's 10 years. That's something that I can easily identify and put a future automated retention on. So this is where I also have this chance to ask people about their naming conventions
Yeah.
and what would be helpful in the future as we move these records to a more collaborative space.
Yeah. So an event-based retention is always interesting because it's problematic. You have to have the trigger for the clock to start versus time-based retention. So it's important. We kind of support management in place. So applying the policy to various repositories or addressing the classification and then moving it to a proper system of record that has more sophisticated capabilities for that. All right, I think this is our last question from Jeffrey. He'd be interested to hear how you handle terabytes of information without scanning forever or creating a spreadsheet that is too big to use. How do we know what we have? One of our themes here. How do we know if there is PII there, which means more risk?
You have to just start by putting it into smaller chunks. And that's going to depend again on your users and how they have structured their filing system. So, for example, in the department that I'm in the admin department, each sub department has a folder, and within that folder, each sub department in there has a folder, and it's several levels deep, but we can all find what we're looking for. So when I did a scan, I could pick this little subdepartment. Let's just look at HR. Let's just look at risk management. Let's just look at purchasing. That worked just fine. I went to scan another region, and when you opened up their server was a separate server. You opened up their server. You click on, here's the folder of things in this server. You open it up, and it was 700 folders. It was a very, very shallow organization system. So it had maintenance records, it had Christmas parties, it had retirement pictures, it had operations, everything. It wasn't deep. So to answer this question, when I ran that scan and downloaded that Excel file, it was 300,000 lines long. And it was very overwhelming. I actually just closed the Excel file, put it away, and didn't look at it for a few more days because I was, same thing. I went, oh my gosh, I can't. This is too much.
Yeah.
So, but we opened it back up and you start finding these chunks. Like, okay, there may be 700 folders, but this folder you can tell that that's all this type of record. So when you start chunking them out like that, it took us about 5 or 6 hours to go through that spreadsheet. It was not as bad as I thought. I had scheduled a 3-day trip down there to go through this, and we started finding these chunks, and we also started finding a lot of backups. Somebody had backed up their computer once and forgot to delete the backup. There were some places that it was really easy. So my trip that I had scheduled for 3 days actually only took me half a day.
So
And
it's a bit of an archaeological dig.
it was a
You
little
just
bit of
start
a
going.
dig. And you have to you have to break it out into chunks.
Yeah. So we're going to squeeze in one more question because this is a live one. So Joe asks, as you transition to newer records management systems, are you considering how to discard or preserve records that are stored in structured applications?
I
So
think
we're talking here about ROT and unstructured
in
information and cleaning that
unstructured. So
up.
for
So yeah,
in the more structured systems, the way that and everybody's going to have a different answer, the way that we're planning on handling things is if you have a system of record, we want you to keep your stuff in your system of record.
yeah,
I don't want anything out of the finance system. I don't want anything out of the regulatory system. What I want is to make sure that everything goes in that system. So
yeah,
I'm not trying to I don't want I don't want control of everything. I don't want to see everything. But there, an example, this is a little bit more unstructured, but an example is we have an HR system, but we did not have the document manager portion of the HR system that we had. So almost everything went in the HR system, but medical records and FMLA and those kind of things that were more sensitive went over into a separate file in our records management system. And then other documents stayed in paper and they're in a filing cabinet in somebody's desk. So if I wanted my own personnel record, I'd have to go to 3 or 4 different places to find my record.
Yeah.
Um, so instead of trying to capture everything that that system has and bring it over to a new records management system, I didn't want to do that. What I wanted to do was say, hey, why didn't you buy the document manager module of the system you already own? Let's use that system to its full capability. And now that we have that piece that we were missing, we can now put those documents over in that system. So there's a lot of upgrades like that going on across our agency. IT is very, very busy.
Yeah.
So
No, it's a good question. And yeah, there are different strategies. So, um, do you discard or preserve records that are stored? So you're applying your attention. You don't want to move things forward that you, same with the physical records. You don't really scan everything. A lot of these things should age out. So you want to apply your policy. And then if you do need to retain them, you need to either migrate them forward or have a designated archive where you can still apply policy as they sort of age out over time. These are good questions. So we're going to close out. I appreciate everyone participating and asking questions. So thank you to our audience. But Kelly, really appreciate you, the work that we've had the opportunity to do, collaborating with you, and sharing your experience with this audience and everything you do to participate in the. We appreciate it. Thanks, everyone, for your questions. And we look forward to seeing you guys on our next event. Thanks, everyone.
thank you.